Welcome to my YouTube channel. Make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification bell, and feel free to comment in the comment section. Um, so today we'll be looking at cognitive development. We'll be looking at cognitive development according to Levy Vygotsky. We'll be looking at cognitive development according to Levy Vygotsky. Coming to the background of Levi Vygotsky, Levi Vygotsky was born in 1896 and he died in 1934. He was a Russian teacher who is considered to be a pioneer in learning in a social context. So, as a psychologist, Levi Vygotsky was also the first psychologist to examine how our social interactions influence our our cognitive growth. In addition to that, he was convinced that learning occurred through interactions with others in our communities, for instance, with peers, adults, teachers, and other mentors. So Levi Vygotsky argued that children's cognitive development can be enhanced through the interactions with others in the communities. For instance, the peers, the adults, the teachers, the parents, the caregivers, and other mentors. So Levi Vygotsky also sought to understand how people learn in a social environment. He wanted to understand how people learn in the social environment, and he created a unique theory on social learning. In addition to that, he determined that teachers have the ability to control many factors in an educational settings, including the tasks, the behaviors, and the responses from the learners. So a teacher has a great ability or task to control many factors in an education setting, including the kind of task that the learners are supposed to do, the behaviors of the learners, and also their responses. Levi Vygotsky also added that culture was a primary determinant of knowledge acquisition. So culture, according to Levi Vygotsky, culture it plays a major role in knowledge acquisition. He also argued that children learn from the beliefs and attitudes modeled by their culture. So cognitive development is greatly influenced by our culture. So coming to the concepts related to cognitive development, Levi Vygotsky outlined about three main concepts related to cognitive development. So the first one is culture. I've already talked about culture. So culture, according to Levi Vygotsky, culture is significant. It is important in learning. He added that language is the root of culture. Therefore, language is very important in learning. The last concept he talked about is that individuals learn and develop within their role in the community. So individuals learn and develop within their role in the community. So now, having talked about the concept related to cognitive development, I want us to look at to understand what culture means. So culture can be defined as the morals, the values, the beliefs of its community members, which are held in place with systems and establishments. So these include acceptable attitudes and conducts that are communicated by the use of language. So in other words, we can say culture is shaped over time as a result of specific events whose messages are then conveyed to its members. So In addition to that, Vygotsky explained that culture consistently affects cognitive development by affecting human behavior. So Levi Vygotsky explained that culture consistently affects cognitive development by affecting human behavior. So apart from culture, Levi Vygotsky also talked about self-regulation and private speech. So self-regulation can be defined as the ability to think and solve problems without the help of others. So self-regulation can be defined as the ability to think and solve problems without the ability of others. And then, having looked at self-regulation, we can move on to look at private speech. So according to Levi Vygotsky, this is children's self-talk, which guide their thinking and actions, which are internalized as inner speech. So according to Levi Vygotsky, he defined private speech as the children's self-talk, which guide their thinking and actions, which are later internalized as silent inner speech. So, for instance, children talk to themselves when faced with a difficult task. So when kids are faced with a difficult task, they usually talk to themselves. So according to Levi Vygotsky, children who usually talk to themselves when faced with difficult tasks develop better. They develop their cognitive development is at a faster rate compared to those who don't usually talk to themselves. So private speech is very, very important when kids are handling a difficult task and they're speaking to themselves. We as caregivers, we as teachers, we should allow them to do that because it will help them to develop um, their cognitive. Let us move on to look at zone of proximal development. So, apart from private speech, Lady Vygotsky also talked about zone of proximal development and scaffolding. So, I want us to look at these two major concepts or models in details. We'll start by looking at zone of proximal development. So according to Levi Vygotsky, zone of proximal development, it refers to the range of abilities an individual can perform with the guidance of an expert, but cannot yet perform on their own. So zone of proximal development can be defined as a range of abilities a learner or a child can perform with the guidance of an expert, but cannot yet perform on their own. So here we have a diagram. Okay, so this diagram is showing us the first stage is where a learner cannot do a task which a learner cannot do. Then we've got the second layer which is depicting zone of proximal development, where the learner can do with guidance with the help of an expert. Then the last layer or the last stage, it is where a learner can do a task unguided. So according to zone of proximal development, we can say zone of proximal development, this is what a learner can do with the guidance of an expert as we've defined it earlier. So now the following are the stages of a zone of proximal development. The first one is you have to understand that a child can be faced with a task which they cannot do. So when you are presenting a task to your child at the first time, definitely you have to know that the child doesn't have any know-how on how to go about it. So that's the first stage where a learner cannot do. Then you as a caregiver or as a teacher, you as an expert, you have to help that child to do the task. This is where zone of proximal development comes in because it's looking at what a learner can do with with the guidance of an expert. Then after guiding that child, you have to allow the child to do the task unguided. No wonder in a classroom situation, when the teacher is teaching, let's say math, they'll first of all show the child what they're supposed to do by giving them an example, and then thereafter they can allow the child to do on their own after guiding them. So this is zone of proximal development. So what is that we've said on the zone of proximal development? We've said that it refers to the range of abilities an individual can perform with the guidance of an expert, but cannot yet perform on their own. So having looked at zone of proximal development, let us move on to look at scaffolding. So Levi Vygotsky also talked about the model of scaffolding. So the question is, what is scaffolding? So Levi Vygotsky defines scaffolding. Scaffolding has an instruction. He defined scaffolding instruction as the role of teachers and others in supporting learners' development and providing support structures to get to that stage or level. So here teachers provide scaffolds so that the learner can accomplish certain tasks they would otherwise not be able to accomplish on their own. So here the goal of the educator is for a child to become an independent learner and a problem solver. For instance, under scaffolding, a teacher can decide to break a difficult task into something simple, or in something that a child can be able to understand. So zone of means scaffolding instruction. He defined. Vygotsky defined scaffolding instruction as a role of teachers and others in supporting learners' development and providing support structures to get to that stage or to help them to accomplish a task. So we as caregivers, we as teachers, we as parents, we have the role of providing support to our learners by providing support in order to help them to accomplish a certain task. A very good example I can give you is where you have to simplify something, okay? You break down a difficult task in something simple which a child can be able to understand. So that's all we can say on scaffolding. So having looked at scaffolding, we can move on to look at our next item, which is educational implication. The question is, what are the educational implications of the theory of cognitive development according to Levi Vygotsky? So the following are the educational implications. The first one is that according to Vygotsky, a child is an active participant in the learning process. A child is an active participant in the learning process. Therefore, a child should be involved. So the educator has to make sure that the child is fully involved. To create an environment where the child can fully participate in the learning process. And then we as teachers also, we have to understand the importance of individual differences in our learners. Our learners are not at the same level, so we should be able to understand the individual differences. In addition to that, we have to assist children in discovery. Where children need help, we should be able to assist them. And then teachers should also guide learning through explanation. So as a teacher, when you're teaching, you have to provide guidance to the learners. So a teacher should guide learning through explanation, demonstration, and verbal prompts. Yeah. Then Vygotsky also stressed, I've talked about active learning already. So he talked about active learning, okay? So assessing what they already know. So here you have to assess what the learners already know and establishing what they are capable of learning. You need to know what they already know, and you have to establish what they are capable of learning. Then a teacher should teach within the zone, okay? The teacher should teach within the zone. The last one is allowing teachers to provide sufficient scaffolding. Okay, so as a teacher, you have to make sure that you provide enough scaffolding or enough support for fostering growth and development. Thank you very much for listening. Stay blessed.